This documentary counted down the 7 most statistically improbable ways ordinary people met their end. The list began with split-second disasters involving everyday machines and included seemingly impossible flukes of nature and physics. Each incident exposed how routine life could be interrupted by cascading coincidences, turning familiar moments instantly fatal. Some cases defied logic because of the number of independent failures that had to align. Others revealed hidden threats that had been lurking in plain sight. Which everyday activity proved the deadliest? The countdown began with number 7. A vending machine stood as a fixture in countless break rooms, its purpose simple: to deliver snacks at the push of a button. In North America, these machines averaged 880 pounds, nearly the weight of a grand piano. On a routine afternoon, an office worker approached the machine with coins in hand, repeating a ritual performed thousands of times. The snack spirals dangled, an item jammed. Frustration led to a gentle shake, then a firmer rock. What most users did not realize was that the center of gravity in these machines sat perilously high, especially when loaded. Even a small tilt could tip the balance. The Consumer Product Safety Commission recorded at least 37 deaths from vending machine tipovers since 1978. The physics were unforgiving. When a machine began to fall, mass and torque multiplied rapidly. A full unit could deliver more than 4,000 newtons of force, a crushing load in an instant. The victim became pinned, chest compressed against the floor. Death resulted not from blunt trauma, but from compressive asphyxia. The lungs could not expand, oxygen dropped, and consciousness faded within minutes. Emergency crews often arrived too late to reverse the outcome. OSHA incident logs describe these events as statistical anomalies, but the pattern was consistent: a routine moment, a stuck snack, a shift in balance, and a cascade of mechanical forces. Most machines had lacked anchoring or warning labels before the mid-1990s. Today, industry standards recommended securing units to walls, but millions remained unsecured in public spaces. The improbability of fatality remained high, estimated at 1 in tens of millions, but for those caught beneath, routine had turned instantly lethal. The ordinary act of buying a snack became a fatal encounter with hidden physics. A city sidewalk in late winter offered little warning. The air was mild, the sky clouded, and the daily commute unfolded as usual, an ordinary routine. A pedestrian followed the same route taken hundreds of times before, passing beneath a row of older brick buildings. Above, the roof lines were lined with ice, remnants of repeated freeze and thaw cycles that had built silent, heavy columns along the eaves. Municipal codes required property owners to clear roof hazards, but enforcement was sporadic, and the danger remained largely invisible to those below. On that afternoon, a single icicle, tapered and weighing 7 kilograms, had grown unnoticed, anchored to a metal gutter 18 meters above the sidewalk. The icicle was unexpectedly heavy for its appearance, and it remained out of sight to passers-by. As temperatures rose, a subtle shift occurred. Meltwater weakened the bond between ice and metal. A gust of wind, barely enough to ruffle a coat, delivered the final force. The icicle detached and accelerated toward the pavement at terminal velocity. Calculations showed that a mass of this size, falling from that height, could strike with over 1,200 joules of energy. The impact index for the event was 13.2, a figure more often associated with high-speed vehicle collisions than with falling ice. The terminal nature of the fall left no time for avoidance. The trajectory was unbroken, and the timing exact. The pedestrian's head was aligned with the icicle's path at the moment of impact. The dense ice penetrated the cranial vault, causing catastrophic trauma. Medical examiners reported instantaneous loss of consciousness and death within seconds due to massive brain injury and hemorrhage, Emergency response was immediate but futile. The death was classified as accidental due to penetrating cranial trauma. In the aftermath, investigators reviewed maintenance records and city ordinances. The rarity of the incident, which required precise alignment of mass, height, trajectory, and human presence, placed it among the most statistically improbable fatalities. Yet the convergence of neglected maintenance, seasonal weather, and ordinary routine revealed how an everyday walk could become a fatal encounter with gravity and ice. A shopping mall on a weekend afternoon. The escalator hummed beneath fluorescent lights, ferrying crowds between floors. Among them, a woman boarded with a shopping bag in one hand and her phone in the other. Her hair, long enough to reach the small of her back, swayed as she scrolled through messages. The ride was routine. Escalators in the United States carried 105 billion passengers each year, and for most, the journey was uneventful. At the top landing, a loose strand of hair brushed the moving comb plate and slipped into the narrow gap where the escalator tread met the fixed skirt. The machine's steel teeth gripped with more force than a human arm could resist. Within 0.3 of a second, the hair was pulled taut. The tensile load spiked above 600 newtons, enough to drag an adult head downward. Emergency stop buttons were installed at both ends, but their activation relied on witnesses who often froze or failed to react in time. On this day, the stop was not pressed until after the mechanism had already claimed its victim. The pulling force ripped the scalp from the skull in a process known as avulsion. Blood vessels tore open, and exsanguination began almost immediately. Medical literature recorded that a person could lose a fatal volume of blood from scalp wounds in under 90 seconds. Despite the presence of bystanders, the injury was catastrophic. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but the loss was irreversible. The official cause of death was traumatic avulsion and hemorrhagic shock. Investigators reviewed maintenance logs and found that the escalator's last inspection was overdue by several months. The skirt plate gap exceeded the recommended width by several millimeters, increasing the risk of entrapment. ANSI safety standards called for regular skirt brush installation and emergency stop checks, but compliance varied by operator. The incident's impact index was calculated at 15.0, reflecting the combined improbability of hair length, distraction, mechanical gap, and delayed stop response. For those who used escalators daily, the hazard remained hidden, an ordinary ride turning fatal through an invisible convergence of small failures. A backyard on the edge of a suburban golf course offered a sense of quiet retreat. On a late spring afternoon, a homeowner settled into a lawn chair, shielded by a row of trees that marked the property line. The routine was familiar: reading, gardening, or simply enjoying the distant thwack of drivers from the fairway beyond. There was no expectation of danger. The nearest tee box sat nearly 200 yards away, separated by fences and a buffer of rough. Yet the geometry of golf allowed for rare, unpredictable trajectories. A player on the course lined up a drive. The clubhead accelerated through the ball at 73 meters per second, transferring kinetic energy that propelled the ball with more than 160 joules, enough to shatter bone at close range. Most shots landed safely within the fairway, but a miscalculated swing sent this ball slicing over the tree line. The ball cleared the course boundary, arced over the fence, and descended at a steep angle. In that fraction of a second, the homeowner's head was positioned precisely in the ball's path. The point of impact was the temporal bone, one of the thinnest and most fragile parts of the skull. Medical studies showed that a force above 80 joules could fracture that bone. The energy delivered here was approximately double that threshold. The blow ruptured the middle meningeal artery, causing rapid intracranial bleeding. Loss of consciousness was nearly instantaneous, and death followed within minutes due to brainstem compression. The sequence was silent. Neighbors noticed only when the homeowner failed to respond to repeated calls. Emergency responders confirmed fatal cranial trauma. Golf course liability investigations revealed that while errant balls occasionally broke windows or dented cars, fatal injuries were vanishingly rare. The impact index for this event was calculated at 20.8, a figure reflecting the convergence of 4 independent variables: the golfer's miss-hit, the ball's velocity, the homeowner's exact location, and the precise angle required for a lethal outcome. Forensic analysis confirmed that a shift of even a few centimeters would have meant a harmless near miss. In this case, the randomness of a distant sporting action transformed an ordinary moment at home into one of the most statistically improbable deaths recorded. On November 28, 2004, Philip Quinn, age 24, placed a lava lamp on a lit burner in his trailer home in Kent, Washington. The action was ordinary, a simple attempt to make the colored wax move faster. The intention was simple: to speed the lamp's warming and bring the wax to life. Lava lamps were designed for gentle heating from a small bulb, never for direct flame or high heat. The glass was thin, and the cap was airtight. As minutes passed, heat transferred rapidly through the glass, and internal pressure climbed beyond what the vessel was built to contain. In sealed glass containers, rapid heating could force pressure above 400 kilopascals, nearly 6 times atmospheric pressure within minutes. There was no visible warning, no hissing, no cracking. The lamp remained silent as pressure mounted. Without warning, the vessel exploded. The glass shattered in all directions. One shard, propelled at high velocity, struck Quinn in the chest. The fragment entered between the ribs and pierced the heart. Death was nearly instantaneous. Penetrating cardiac trauma caused massive internal bleeding, and exsanguination followed in less than a minute. When his parents arrived hours later, they found the kitchen littered with glass and debris. The scene was quiet, the cause invisible until pieced together by police and the medical examiner. Toxicology confirmed no drugs or alcohol. The King County coroner ruled the death accidental, caused by a glass shard from a lava lamp explosion. The lamp's internal physics were unforgiving. Heat accelerated vapor expansion, and pressure built with nowhere to escape. The glass, never intended to serve as a pressure vessel, failed catastrophically. Shrapnel from such explosions could reach speeds exceeding 45 meters per second, enough to penetrate bone and vital organs. The incident was classified as a household equipment explosion, a statistical outlier with an impact index of 21.6. Product safety bulletins later warned against placing sealed lamps on stoves, but the warning came too late for Quinn. The ordinary act of improvising with a household novelty item became a fatal encounter with invisible forces. For investigators, routine behavior, household experimentation, and the physics of sealed pressure converged in a death so improbable it bordered on the impossible. Night settled over a rural home. The rooms were quiet, the world outside dark and still. In the bedroom, a person lay asleep, unaware of any danger above. Overhead, a helicopter sliced through the night sky, its lights barely visible against the blackness. Suspended beneath the aircraft, a cargo net held a single live cow weighing nearly 500 kilograms, being transported as part of a livestock relocation. This flight operated under FAA Part 133 regulations, which required strict standards for external load operations, cargo nets to be certified, pilots to be specially trained, and maintenance logs to be kept for every lift. In practice, cargo net failures were rare but not impossible. Each knot, each strap, each carabiner represented a link in a chain where a single weak point could mean disaster. Randomness. At an altitude of 120 meters, the netting gave way. The cow, freed from restraint, plummeted toward the earth. In freefall, the animal accelerated rapidly, reaching speeds of nearly 38 meters per second before impact. The kinetic energy at that velocity was immense, approximately 588 kilojoules, far exceeding the structural limits of a typical residential roof. The animals struck the roof directly above the bedroom, the force driving both cow and debris through the ceiling in a single violent instant. The combined mass and speed delivered an impact force no human body could withstand. Blunt trauma was immediate and total, with the victim pinned beneath thousands of pounds of animal and collapsed structure. Medical analysis later estimated an impact index of 35.0, a magnitude more commonly found in high-speed train collisions than in household accidents. Impact. For the sleeping occupant, there was no warning, no chance to react. The sequence from net failure to fatal impact lasted less than 5 seconds. Emergency responders arrived to find a scene that defied belief: a collapsed bedroom, a dead cow, and beneath the wreckage, a life ended by a convergence of aviation logistics, livestock weight, and catastrophic mechanical failure. Investigators reviewed maintenance logs, pilot credentials, and cargo net certifications, finding that even with protocols followed, the probability of such a sequence was vanishingly small. The event prompted renewed scrutiny of external load safety standards and led regulators to consider stricter oversight for livestock transport. But for the victim, the randomness was absolute. A routine night of sleep interrupted by a chain of events so unlikely that no risk model could have predicted it. The danger came from the sky, a collision of mass, height, and mechanical breakdown that transformed an ordinary home into the site of one of the most improbable fatalities ever recorded. Absolute. At 2:15 a.m. on March 1st, 2013, in Seffner, Florida, the ground beneath 13,520 Faithway Drive gave way without warning. Jeffrey Bush, 37 years old, was asleep in his bedroom. The collapse was instantaneous. A cover collapse sinkhole opened directly beneath the house, swallowing Bush and the entire room into a void that extended nearly 6 meters across and dropped 30 feet deep. The rest of the family heard a crash and rushed to the doorway, but the floor had vanished. There were no tremors, no surface cracks, no time to react. The geology beneath Seffner was karst limestone, riddled with fractures and cavities formed by centuries of groundwater erosion. Overlying this was a thin layer of sandy clay and residual soil, stable only as long as the limestone below remained intact. For decades, water had seeped through the soil, dissolving the bedrock grain by grain. Heavy rainfall in the preceding weeks accelerated the process, increasing groundwater pressure and weakening the already fragile ceiling of the underground cavity. The collapse occurred when the soil above could no longer bridge the growing void, and everything above dropped into the darkness below. Rescue teams arrived within minutes, but the sinkhole was unstable and continued to expand. Hillsborough County engineers and USGS geologists on site confirmed that the void was part of a network of interconnected cavities, making further collapse likely and any recovery attempt too dangerous. The depth and instability of the hole made survival impossible. The medical examiner concluded that Bush died from blunt force trauma and asphyxiation, likely within moments of the collapse. His body was never recovered. The house and 2 neighboring homes were condemned and demolished, and the site was filled with gravel to prevent further subsidence. There had been no visible indicators to warn of the danger. Subsurface erosion had been ongoing for years, undetectable from the surface. There had been no sagging floors, no cracks in the walls, no shifting foundations. The randomness of the event was absolute. A normal night and a routine sleep ended when the earth itself vanished. Fatal residential sinkhole collapses were exceedingly rare. The convergence of long-term subterranean erosion, recent heavy rainfall, and the precise location of the victim's bed created a scenario with odds approaching the astronomical. For the Bush family and for investigators, The event underscored a truth both unsettling and inescapable. The surface of daily life rested on hidden uncertainties, and sometimes, without warning, the earth itself opened up. Across all 7 cases, one pattern stood out. The most ordinary routines could become fatal through a chain of rare coincidences no one could predict. These deaths proved that true risk was not always visible or logical, and it lurked in the statistical shadows of everyday life. In a world ruled by chance, certainty was just an illusion. Stay aware, and thanks for watching.